Call the meeting to order and have the roll taken, please.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Egan?
Here.
Mr. Dunn? Mr. Gentili?
Here.
Mrs. Lasky?
Here.
Ms. Goodman?
Here.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Here.
Okay. And item 3 is approval of the agenda. Barry, you had a request for a change, correct?
Yes, I would like to remove from this meeting's agenda 10A, the Manistee Township zoning, until next meeting. Given that Jeff's district is Manistee Township, I really want him to be part of that conversation. So, there's no pressing timeline on it. We've been kind of hanging out there for months, so I'd prefer to wait until a meeting where he's here.
Motion to accept the not amended, but updated agenda.
Second?
Moved and seconded to accept the agenda as modified. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It is approved. Public comment?
Have none?
I see no public here to make comment. I'd like to welcome Richard on the Zoom there, if you can hear us. We'll get to you in a minute here.
Sounds good.
Well, it's actually now.
It's actually now, yes. Short minute. Item 5 is the audit report, and it's being done via Zoom. So you have the floor, sir.
All right, well, thanks everybody for having me. Do you all happen to have a copy of the audit report in front of you or with you?
I don't know.
I didn't print it
I
out.
do not.
Well,
I have
There's
one.
45 pages.
Yeah.
I'll bring it up. I'll bring it up. But we can, if you refer to specific pages, I can have them up on the monitor for everyone.
Yeah, sure, that, or I'm not sure. I'm not super good with Zoom. I can't remember how, if you wanted to let me share my screen, we could do that as well, where I could just kind of walk us through it.
That actually would be better because you'll know where you are.
Right.
So let me here.
And if it becomes really cumbersome, I have no problem just kind of talking everybody through it. There's really not a whole lot of material to go over.
You should now be able to share.
Okay. Appreciate everyone bearing with me here for just a second. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not the great, here we go, there's the button. And I want to share this screen. Okay, can everyone see a screen that has a page on it that says opinions here that I'm highlighting?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so just for a frame of reference, I'll go up to the top here. So presenting for the audit report for the year ended September 30, 2021. So it's not going to be too long here, just a couple of months. We'll be back in communication with everybody, getting the ball rolling for the fiscal 22 audit. So that is on the way. So arguably the most important part of the independent auditors report is it's page 2. So this is our independent auditors report. This is the end product really that you all receive as a part of being audited. And this opinions paragraph here, it states, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities and the general fund of the authority as of September 30, 2021. Effectively, this is it used to be referred to as a clean opinion. It's an unqualified opinion. So as far as in the world of audits, it's the highest level of opinion you can receive. So it says we were able to get everything that we needed, and we were able to have an unmodified opinion over the financial statements that were prepared. So I'm going to next get into the management's discussion and analysis section. It's kind of like a Cliff Notes version of the audit report. So if you want more of a narrative type approach, this is really a good section. It's got all the same information. Touch on a few of the financial highlights here. So the assets of the authority exceeded liabilities at the close of the most recent fiscal year by $8.1 million approximately. Of that amount, $68,712 represents unrestricted net position, which may be used to meet the authority's ongoing obligations to citizens and creditors. And that those figures are on the full accrual basis of accounting, so it's that's considering all of the authority's assets and liabilities. During the year, the authority received approximately $680,000 in revenues and incurred about $558,000 in expenses, resulting in a decrease in net position of $178,440. Now, this next bullet point here, we're going to talk about the general fund. So the general fund is what you all are going to be more used to seeing. You know, the financial statements that you'd be receiving would be, like a general fund balance sheet or a general fund revenue and expenditure report. So the general fund had a decrease in fund balance during the year of $833,000 for an ending fund balance of $68,712, and that $68,712 is what we had mentioned up here earlier. So overall, it's a pretty flat year. Revenues and expenses are mostly even. And at the end of the fiscal year, unassigned fund balance for the authority was $68,325, or approximately 10% of the authority's annual expenditures. Now, that is a little bit on the lower side, but I know historically and I say a little bit on the lower side, that's compared to other units of government, where typically we see closer to anywhere from 30 to 50% more commonly. But again, I understand how the authority operates, and the revenues and expenditures are generally, pretty even with themselves, unless there's some other funding situations going on. And I know this figure is higher than it was, say, in 2019, for instance. So I know there is some increase there. So you are trending in the correct direction. Also, in this management's discussion and analysis section, we have it's a set of condensed financial statements. And so this first one, it's a condensed statement of net position. So this is all the same information that you would see in the basic financial statement section. It's just a little more trimmed up, and it also gives you a comparative for 2021 compared to 2022. Also in this section, we do talk about any notable differences that we would see. For instance, seeing a big decrease here in receivables from year to year. I'm sure that was attributed to in the previous years having AES receivables, where in 21 you did not. Same for accounts payable. Those things are pretty much offsetting each other. I mean, that was really, I would say, the biggest change for the authority is no longer having those AES monies. We'll shift ahead a page. And so again, we've got some comparative figures here, but this is for program revenues, general revenues, and expenses. So it's really an income statement. We can see again, big difference is just the AES, where again, all those monies that would come in, as you all know, basically federal subsidy, where you had significant revenues coming in, but those revenues go to pay for an air carrier. Not having that in this year can be very apparent. That's discussed further in this section. So one other area I wanted to touch on here, general fund budgetary highlights. So as you know, being a part of the board, you have to prepare and present a budget for approval every year. One thing that can happen during the year is budget amendments occurring throughout the year, where the budget can be increased or decreased as necessary. And there were a few areas where we had some significant changes here, where there was some budget for capital outlay came up a bit short. So you might have seen a letter come in from Treasury. You may or may not have. I know if budget variances are too large, Okay, yep. When budget variances get to a certain size, Treasury does take note. So one thing that I would very strongly recommend to the board is as a part of your periodic review of the financial statements of the authority, taking a look at budget to actual figures. So seeing where you're at for your budget, where your actual figures are at, and then if necessary, make an amendment. So Treasury doesn't care too much if you come in way under budget. I'm not saying, budget $1 million for, personnel maintenance or utilities. So you're guaranteed to come under, but doesn't hurt to be, coming in under budget, can hurt to be over budget, just in terms of, having a little extra administrative work and dealing with Treasury. Let's see here. That really wraps up that management's discussion analysis section. So I'm just going to point you to the basic financial statements section, which would begin on page 10. And again, this is pretty much the same information that we just looked at in the MD&A section. We just don't have any explanations and whatnot to go with it. These are just GAAP financial statements that are requirement of Treasury. Again, these are figures that we had already taken a look at. The footnotes to the financial statements can be important. It can show you year-to-year activity. Specifically, I'll jump ahead to capital assets. You can just kind of have an idea of, you had some construction in progress during the year, so you can see where those additions happened. There was some other airport equipment that was purchased. And then down here, it just shows what your depreciation figure was for the year. So again, depreciation, this relates to full accrual financial statements where, again, on the financials you're receiving, you're not seeing things like your capital assets being listed on those financials. So as a part of the audit, we do present a set of full accrual statements. So the authority looks more comparable to something like a for-profit business. And in part in doing that, we do present these capital asset schedules. So can be useful for showing year-to-year information. And a little more detail on the budget in the required supplementary section. You can see, where you came in well, where you came in a little bit over budget. So again, it's just broken down a little bit more.
Richard,
Yes.
go back to that depreciation.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to make a comment for the board's sake.
Oh, sure.
So just if you look at our total depreciation is around $300,000 a year, and depreciation isn't by no means a exact or even a close measure of the rate that the physical assets are declining, but it is a measurement of that. Many of the larger items on there, like runways, et cetera, I think are depreciated over, I think, a 40-year time frame. Equipment less than that. And as you know, for the board's sake, we generally are paying for capital equipment and projects like that with federal dollars. And we are allocated right now $150,000 a year based on our airport classification and status. That doesn't even cover the annual depreciation. So we need more financial input. Now, there are other grant opportunities through the FAA and the feds that bridge that gap, but we are always essentially in a position of begging for grant dollars to do the projects we need to get done, but that's as close a word as I can think of. So, the scope of the value of the assets that make up the airport is significant, and they all degrade over time, and they do require dollars to maintain and keep up to date. And $150,000 a year does not go very far to maintain those. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to kind of give a little background to the board, because it's not very often we see that depreciation number at the board level. As you said, our monthly financial statements don't carry that type of information.
Right. Yeah, and this is, again, it is an idea of, where you're at in terms of capital assets. I mean, I'm sure, many others of you are on, other governmental boards or, part of businesses, and you see where, okay, well, depreciation for a truck. Well, we'll put 5 years on it. Well, turns out you got 10 years out of the truck. Doesn't mean the truck's worth $0. It just meant that was what management's estimated expected useful life of that asset was. And for things like runways, taxiways, ramps, I mean, you're going to be dealing with, things like weather. If you have particularly bad winters, lots of too much rain, there's things that can add excess wear. Or if you have very fair weather for a number of years, you could get some extra miles out of those. So, and yeah, Barry, I would agree with you there, where, if you're saying, you're only getting about 150 in additions, for the year, and you've got 300 there, it's might be time to, start taking a look at, okay, well, when we are putting these assets on the books, trying to get that idea of, okay, well, what those estimated lives truly are, making this information, as useful as it can be. Okay, so beyond that, I really didn't have anything I wanted to cover with you all. I think we, overall, I don't believe we had any internal controls findings, anything like that would have been presented back on this section of the audit report. PFCs, I know we're still working on recouping a lot of those PFC dollars from years past.
Could you comment on the fact that we are required to have essentially a separate PFC audit as part of our statement and what that entails?
Oh, sure. So PFCs each year, there is I can't cite the exact federal requirement, but and I think every airport that we work with that has these has a different, I can't remember if we're all dealing with the same person at the FAA or not, but they want to see that these PFCs are being expended. One moment, please.
Never doing a remote meeting.
Barry, was it just my eyes or in that financial highlights? He had 858
Yeah, it
or
was, he said
558.
he said the wrong thing.
Okay.
I'm back. Sorry about that. So I heard there was a little more comments that I'll address. As far as that requirement on the PFCs, it's really the FAA wants to see that they want to see a schedule presented showing that the previously approved projects or the currently approved projects, the dollars are being collected and being applied towards those projects. So in the case of Manistee Blacker, these projects they're old. They're old projects, and effectively the airport is
Lost in thought.
covering money through these PFC charges through projects. So the Fed is once monies are being applied. So where they've been approved to have current projects going, but they were also in the same position as Manistee Blacker, where they were recovering from these years old projects. Yes.
You could kind of repeat what you just said, because you broke up there and we kind of missed that
Oh, sure.
explanation.
No worries. No worries. Yeah, no worries. All right, so as far as the PFCs go, the Fed wants to see effectively as a separate audit, a schedule being put together or a statement being put together showing the approved PFC charges or I'm sorry, the approved PFC projects, and then how the collected PFC revenues are being applied against each of the items within an approved project. So that's a requirement that my understanding is the FAA has that. It's just a part of it. It's just a contingent component of being able to levy those charges. They want to see that separate report. So what happens is, in the case of Manistee Blacker, the projects are old projects that were long since completed, where monies were used that were from a combination of the airport, the county, maybe even the city from way back when. And the airport currently is using is still collecting the PFC dollars to recoup those costs effectively. So other airports, for instance, have current PFC programs where they have projects that are currently being done or yet to be done.
Then we lost again. So what he's describing here is our PFC application is a bit different. Instead of you collecting passenger taxes to pay for a current project, ours,
It's just in innovation.
Sorry, you broke up again, so I was just kind of
explaining. It looks
again.
like I'm having some connection issues. Yeah, I apologize for that.
That's okay. So ours is a bit different in that when we put our PFC application together 15 years ago, they went back in time, and basically the local match of every project that had been done in probably the previous 10 years was what that PFC covered. So as he said, all of those projects have been completed 15, 20 years ago. So as the revenues come in, they are technically there to pay us back for our local match on those projects. But as they come in now, they're really available for us for new things because those projects are completed in that sense.
Correct.
As opposed to a more typical PFC use where you may be borrowing or bonding out a capital terminal addition and using PFCs to pay that over time, and then those revenues have to go to pay off those, that debt. Ours is different in that sense.
Right.
And we're probably getting close to the point of, basically redoing that application and kind of collecting the last 15 years worth of matching and doing a new round and basically upping the amount that we have available to collect. Now, we just need the passenger numbers to increase to then translate that into revenue.
Yeah, it looks like
so there's a whole section in the audit that is on this topic, and it's a requirement, as was said earlier, by the FAA.
Yep. So at present, it looks like you're coming in at about just about half, or well, not quite. So you're still under half collected for the PFCs just relating to these older projects. Looks like a couple of the bigger ones have been, yeah. So there's still a handful of things here that it will take a while. And again, without those passenger numbers, I mean that's how you're collecting the revenues. I think it's $4 or $4.50 a person, or per enplanement.
Correct.
Okay. So really, touching on the PFC and any but I didn't really have anything else for you all. So if you have any questions for me, it sounded like as I was coming back on, someone said I might have misspoke on a couple of the figures. So yeah, and any clarification that needs to happen, or if you just have any other questions for me, I'm all ears.
I do have one more question, and that's kind of, again, it's just how this differs from the last few years, is there's no single audit done this year.
Right.
You could explain what a single audit is and what the threshold and requirements are for that?
Absolutely, yeah. So the single audit, a single audit is a federal requirement in which effectively, like, a separate audit has to be done over federal expenditures. That occurs when an entity has expended in excess of $750,000 of federal monies. So that can occur off of a federal borrowing, or it can occur off of a federal grant. So in previous years for Manistee Blacker, the AES monies that came in were a grant, and and it was multiple millions of dollars each year. So what happened then at that point is, even though the money's coming in and it states explicitly that well, these monies can only go for paying for I can't remember the name of the previous vendor you had used, but in any case, so being that the airport is no longer receiving AES monies, the amount of federal monies that you are receiving each year is under the threshold for requiring a federal single audit. So unless you were to have a very large federal grant, or a federal loan, there wouldn't be a need for a single audit. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. And I saw, I just got a notification that my internet connection was unstable, so just wanted to make sure everything came through okay on that one.
Oh, we heard you through that explanation. So.
Good deal. Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions? I've been asking them.
Okay.
Sounds like at the board level, our takeaway is, in terms of recommendations on things maybe we can look to do a little bit better, is I want to make sure that I took this away correctly, is be looking at budget to actual, scrutinizing that maybe a little bit more.
Absolutely.
And doing budget updates when it looks like we know we're going to exceed. Okay.
And
Very much so, yes.
where we, as you saw in there, the biggest discrepancy is usually in what projects that we end up doing in a given year that are grant funded.
Yep.
Because when we're preparing the budget, we often have no idea what those are going to be. We have, a semblance of a plan, but until those grants get approved and the funding's in place, we often don't know. So typically, the initial budget that's adopted doesn't include those grant dollars. And what we fail to do then is go back during the year when those are known and updating the budget.
Yep.
And then there are some line items that do sometimes get out of whack for whatever reason, and same process as that. And most governmental entities that I'm familiar with will generally either at the end of the year or very near the end of the year have a kind of a mass update to the budget that adjusts for the actuals, and we just haven't been in the practice of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'd like to say to that, Barry.
Yep.
As far as the budget amendment process, I also see that many local units are in the habit of doing that once a year. So the Department of Treasury guidelines explicitly state that an entity shall not expend dollars that have not yet been appropriated for. So while that is the common practice, that we do see, maybe one massive budget amendment a year, I would recommend, making that, whether it's monthly or quarterly that you're looking at financial statements. The more often that process is occurring, that would be preferable in the eyes of Treasury. And also, just from an auditing perspective too, or even for transparency of the public, or just for boosting of public confidence, in ensuring that effectively your finger's on the pulse of the operations of the entity. So it can certainly do wonders for that. But like you mentioned too, with grants, many times, grants are on a reimbursement basis. So if you get large change orders and it's like, oh, well, it's going to cost us an extra $100,000 on this project. And well, while you're not worried about it because it's still probably well within the cap on a grant, you'll still want to make sure that, while you're aware those revenues are coming in, certainly amending for the expense on that as well.
Anyone else? Well, thank you, Richard. Appreciate your walking through this with us. And
No problem.
enjoy the rest of your day.
You bet. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, sir. Item 6 is approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Everybody had a chance to look at those online, read them over? Do I have any changes or recollections that disagree with what was printed? And I'd like a motion to approve them as printed.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed? And minutes are approved. Item 7, Treasurer's Report. Accounts payable was also online. I printed off a copy for myself. Do other people have that?
Got mine up.
Copies, I guess.
You have one, I'll take one.
I just had the one.
Oh, never mind.
I have one I can give you. Is it just the last one that was sent today?
I think so.
So you're looking at the accounts payable?
Yeah.
Get the right one up on the screen.
Yeah, it's the one that's sideways. No.
So, I have to apologize on this, since I didn't get invoices to, the county in time. They didn't make it into the original report. Last week was airport inspection, so I was focused on other things, and it completely escaped my mind to get these in, so the reason you're getting them late is because I dropped the ball on them.
Is that the final bill on the vehicle repair? Last month we were talking about 10 grand.
No, there's another 8, well,
Ouch.
there's another 800, and guess what? We got the vehicle back, the check engine light is back on, and when they reassembled things, they didn't even assemble the link connection between the transmission and the four-wheel drive, so it doesn't even work four-wheel drive mode right now, so it's going back in. So
At further expense? I mean, that's their...
to be determined.
Yeah.
Yeah, the questions on
To
the...
the point that the auditor just made and was pointed out, that line item could be over, we need to make a budget.
It will be over, and when we look at the other reports, we'll see where we are on that.
The comments or questions on accounts payable?
So when we talk about changing this format then, you can put your budgeted and then you can put your, well, what we do is budgeted, then you have your actual per month. And we don't have to get that fancy, but put your budget projections.
I believe that is on the other reports that we're
Mhm.
Yep.
getting at.
And I think we need a motion to accept the accounts payable and action on this.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Moved and seconded to pay the accounts. Have a roll call, please.
Mr. Egan?
Yes.
Jones? Mr. Gentili?
Yes.
Ms. Lasky?
Yes.
Ms. Goodman?
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes. And moving on to the revenues and expenses, the financial statement for the month.
So this is the report that does have the budget numbers in it.
It's not bad.
Over 100%, do we need to make a board action now? That's the budget?
That would certainly be appropriate. So you'll see repairs and maintenance were already 10,500 over. Miscellaneous is over $500, a very small line item that would not draw attention from Treasury, but the repairs and maintenance would. And these other ones that are sitting just above 100%, we've still got July, August, September, a quarter of the year left, so those will likely be further over by the time we're done with the.
Are we able to come up with estimates on what we think those will be? Or just a good faith estimate, so we could increase it now, and then if it does change?
My recommendation would be to direct finance and the treasurer to come back with a proposed set of amendments for the next meeting. That we're having a little time to think about it and giving you numbers that are likely good, all the information we have, as opposed to in this meeting with no preparation. And another thing you'll see is that, this budget does not have that, a line item for capital projects. We'll be having one, between now and the end of the year, so that's another thing that added. Grant you approved at the last meeting for paint marking and crack sealing.
$1,900 that's in there?
Yes, yes.
So there needs to be a motion to recommend or request that?
I don't think you need a motion, I just think you need to, the consensus to direct back to myself and the treasurer to bring back a, list of budget adjustments for the next meeting.
Okay,
Another job for you, so director.
so let's do that.
Okay?
We have a
And
motion.
if it makes it in the minutes, that's even better, to remind us all.
So that's expenditures. Revenues, do these all, I know that it's not linear across the year,
Yep.
but as we look at these, are there any, considering we're 3/4 of the way through the year, that give us pause or concern?
So my, statement on that is no, our revenues are generally in line with where we would expect them to be this time of the year. Those that are lower, those tend to be things that are seasonal. So I look at fuel sales being the one there. You know, the majority of fuel sales happen in, you know, this period of time during the summer into the fall, when we have the jet traffic and larger fuel sales on that. Although I will say that when the airline is canceling a number of flights, that does cut into our total fuel sales as well. So we are trailing on airline sales from budget a little bit. But everything else is pretty much in line with what we would expect. But again,
Reimbursements,
huh?
even the state reimbursements?
Well, that was gonna be the thing I was gonna comment on. So yes, it is, based on, the grants that we had anticipated, but there is no, again, for the grant that was approved last month, there is no corresponding revenue in the budget, neither is there that expense. So we'll come back with both of those items being in here, because that is, so I'm just trying to think, that grant is, I think it's a 90% state, 10% local, because of the pool of money it comes from, so obviously the other 10% is on our dime.
About hangar rent, do we anticipate our hangars becoming a little bit more popular in the next 3 months?
The answer, partly yes. We have seasonal tenants that basically are only occupying certain hangars during the summer.
Get them more usable.
Well, there's,
Why we're
there
trying
are
to fix them
those
up too,
issues,
yeah.
yeah.
The radar.
Any other comments on the revenue and expenses? I'd make a motion to accept that report and approve it.
So moved.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mr. Dunn, Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Ms. Lasky,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Ms. Kaminsky,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Egan,
Yes.
I'm going through the last couple of pages on that report.
I was gonna say, we didn't look at all on that, did we? Oops.
But again, and I mentioned this in my report, is I still haven't received the final invoice on the PFAS. So this outstanding $100,000 reimbursement has not been submitted yet. But that goes a long way to clearing our cash position. This has been mentioned previously.
All right, committee reports, item 8A, executive committee did not meet. Budget committee did meet, and we did quite a bit of work on recommendations for the coming year budget, but we're still missing one big piece that we don't have the information on yet for Barry's compensation, and when that comes in, I'll share that with the rest of the committee, and then we'll
Is
present to,
there an update from the county on this fiscal year's budget timeline? Because it's certainly behind where previous years were. Just kind of curious as to how much time we've got to get ours in.
We're talking about it at the meeting tomorrow.
Okay. Because August and September are then 2 months left, and normally by now you would have already had presentations and draft budgets submitted and everything, and obviously what transpired Friday is a big part of that process, but it's on top of everything else,
so as soon as we get that information, then we need to submit it, correct?
Yes, and I would not be surprised, again, given there's not a lot of time left, that, you know, we might need, a special meeting to approve a draft budget and get it submitted, before potentially the next month's meeting.
August meeting.
All the process and everything's the same as last year. That was our new way of doing it, and it's like, I would just start working, you know,
Right, which is.
knowing that that's your format and what
Right.
you're gonna do.
Yep. But, I mean, I think before something gets submitted into the county's process, this board needs to approve that, even if it is draft. And that has not yet happened at the board level here. The committee has kind of gotten,
Mhm.
a picture of things, but,
So when the committee gets the rest of it together, we can submit a proposal to the board
then that needs to be.
electronically, then
approved as a
look it over, and then we
draft.
have to meet to approve it. Okay.
The feedback from the last budget meeting, was that given to Susan?
Honestly, I have not had any conversations with Susan since her leave, I'll say. So.
She was back in the office, so I'd put something together and
So
email it over.
Is she, I know she was working part-time, is she back full-time-ish now?
Yeah,
Okay, oh, she is, okay.
Yeah.
I've been not
Yeah.
wanting to
Yeah, no, it's time to move
utilize
on.
her time,
Yeah.
now is the time.
Yep.
Because she really needs to be involved in this budget
Mhm.
process, and, we had our first meeting without her, so.
Capital projects, that's, I know we prioritize. You made a presentation about funding, is that that's where we stand, right?
Pushing to get all of them.
Okay.
Makes sense to me.
All right. Then we'll go on to item 9, Airport Director's Report.
Share screen again. Oh, that's a good idea, I always forget that little aspect.
Yeah, it makes me feel useful.
So no incidents or accidents to report in the past month. So flipping over to page 2 then, that's weird, mine doesn't have, yeah, I need one, mine doesn't, I guess I've got it on the screen here. For some reason my copy doesn't have those 2 pages. So, from a employment perspective, and none of this is really news since our last meeting was on June 30th, and I basically had fairly complete numbers for the month of June at that point, even though they weren't official. I really already talked the board through what June was looking like, and again, May and June are polar opposites. May, we were up 40-some% versus a year ago. June, we're down 40-some%. May, we had very minimal canceled flights. In June, we had 46% canceled flights. When the airline can't fly, obviously passengers can't fly, and significant drops in the numbers. So again, I've already mentioned that at our last meeting, June, nothing new there. Now that we are halfway through July, July is right now somewhere between May and June. We are certainly doing better, but not stellar yet. So this morning I had my monthly call with Cape Air, and quite frankly, they are struggling. And I'll mention this tidbit, I guess I'd call it, because it kind of ties into that presentation that I gave the board at the last meeting of kind of the pilot shortage and the issues around that. Cape Air essentially stabilized right now, and as far as attrition goes, you know, number of pilots they're training and building versus those that are leaving, kind of stabilized at a much lower level than they ever anticipated, and they've had to, as was told to me this morning, for the last 4 months, they have been scaling back the size of their company to basically right-size according to the number of pilots they have.
Yeah.
So that's been a painful process internally, and that has led to a lot of missteps, I guess I'd say, operationally, and they're just having to deal with things that they're not used to, and it has not been smooth. You know, operationally, flights getting canceled when there are passengers being rebooked out of other airports, when there are seats available on other flights here. It's just not going internally within Cape Air smoothly. But the tidbit that was told me this morning is there's a new startup airline that is starting up in the Boston area, so in Cape Air's backyard. And they're flying, I forget the manufacturer, but it's a Q400. It's a turboprop 70-seat. So it's kind of an entry-level regional airplane. In the traditional scheme of things, because it's a turboprop, it probably would be somewhat less desirable than a 50 or 70-seat regional jet. So basically, it's near the bottom of the hierarchy when it comes to what pilots are looking for and kind of career steps. Well, this airline needs to hire to start 30 captains. They're offering starting pay of $250,000 a year for what essentially would have been an entry-level aircraft, making a fraction of that at a regional airline a year ago. That causes Cape Air to be worried. So even though they may have happy crew situation in their backyard, that's very tempting for pilots to, you know, look at that as a step, even though they weren't necessarily thinking of it. So the industry continues to navigate through this. In the short term for Manistee, we need to operate our summer schedule, 5 captains. We currently have 4 of those 5 captains in base and, you know, showing up as they're supposed to. So roughly 4/5 of our flights are now covered. So that's a significant improvement. That last captain is currently on paternity leave and will be for a couple more weeks. Once that is over, we should have, for the rest of the summer, all 5 of our captains in place. Now, that doesn't provide coverage for sick days and vacations and other things that can lead to people being out, but at least we have a full complement of captains assigned to our market and operating their routes going forward.
Are they still basing them in Chicago?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Cape Air internally is trying to figure out how to, you know, move forward in this new world and deal with these types of issues. One of the things they're looking at is obviously they're looking at how much they need to adjust compensation to be competitive in this new market. Another piece that they're looking at is that they're really actively trying to hire captains who are 65 and older, because the mandatory retirement age for that next level up, a regional airline or a major airline, is 65. But those captains are then eligible to fly the type of flying that Cape Air does, and they're naturally very experienced and, you know, generally great people if you can find them. So that is one avenue they're pursuing. But another one, and I think Andrew might have mentioned this to the board the last time he joined us in a call, which was a few months ago, is they're actually looking from a company perspective of working with captains and including incentives for their permanent housing in a location. So they would pay part of housing expenses if a captain were to buy a house in Manistee. Again, looking at establishing people in a community. Once you have that more permanent established roots, you're more likely to stay with the company for a longer period of time. So they're trying to be creative and trying to work through the situation. But June was a terrible month. Now, having said that, normally if this were any previous airline and they had canceled 46% of their flights, our social media would be on fire, my phone and email would be off the hook with people complaining. I don't recall a single complaint that I received personally in my position last month. Cape Air is doing a very good job of getting people reaccommodated out of Traverse City, Muskegon, Grand Rapids. Routinely, they are paying $1,000 cab bills to transport people. You know, if you've got some days 30 passengers need to go to Traverse City, that's a lot of cab trips up. Baggage that's coming here, but the passenger flew out of a different airport, then has to be called to people's houses. I mean, they are spending a huge amount of dollars to do good customer service in the midst of this terrible situation. That's not sustainable to them. I asked them point blankly their financial situation. I was assured that they're not, while they are not cash positive in an environment like this, they have significant cash reserves to weather this for the time being. So it's not a critical thing, but it's not sustainable either. So that's good, bad, and ugly as it relates to what the airline has done in June. Any questions on any of that? Looking at airfares then, going on to the next page, fairly typical things have come down a lot from last month. So last month's report, June, was looking at traveling in middle of July, which is basically peak summer travel time. This report is looking out a month, so this is mid-late August travel, which is starting to then taper off. The industry as a whole is dealing with a variety of things. The price of fuel is pushing airfares up, but at the same time, as airfares go up, then demand starts to fall back. So we're really kind of finding a stabilized point. So I mean, what we see here across the board, if you look at the change from 1 month ago, the average fare out of Manistee is $150 cheaper. Average fare out of Traverse City, $170. Average fare out of Grand Rapids, almost $190 cheaper, and Muskegon about $100 cheaper. So a significant pullback in fares in that time window is occurring, kind of balancing things out, maybe disproportionately favoring Grand Rapids as is typical as kind of our lower fare airport in our region. You'll see, and this is really the first time in quite a few months, that Southwest fares are showing up as the lowest fare. Southwest hasn't been recently price competitive, but their pricing, you know, in doing this report out of Grand Rapids, they were significantly less expensive than Delta, who across Traverse City and Grand Rapids was kind of being more competitive this month than maybe typically. But then you throw also a few frontier destinations in there, and those all really combine to drive that average fare out of Grand Rapids down. As I mentioned last month, again, you'll see almost all of the fares that are lower out of Manistee being American, and that's really due to the code share we have, or Cape Air has with American, because with a round trip price of $2.99 on Cape Air to Chicago for these dates, combining that with a United fare out of Chicago, the interline equivalent that we get with United, it's hard to be competitive. But American with code share, they set their pricing for the entire route, and Air gets a part of that based on their agreement there. So you'll see a number of routes either less than that $2.99 on American, starting in Manistee, going through Chicago to the destination, or right around that $300 mark. So that code share is definitely working and helping us be competitive in the region. And it gives us actually good fares and lowest fares in a couple places: Atlanta, Philadelphia, Los Angeles. Are the four were lowest for the month. And then, our free parking is always an added benefit that also helps bring value to the total price. Any questions on the airfare report? To the rest of my report. So I mentioned this briefly a bit earlier. So last week on Thursday was the first half of my airport inspection, and it was the on-site half. So my inspector drove up from Detroit and spent the day here on Thursday. So really, between last meeting and this meeting, most of my time has been preparing for our annual inspection, along with it just being busy summer. No new issues were really reported, unlike last year where we had a whole bunch of tree clearing and things discovered. That doesn't mean there aren't issues. There are things that were identified previously that are, continuing issues. And since we have a project this fall, again, that the board approved last month, the grant for remarking pavement and crack sealing, there are non-standard markings we have on our pavement, and I actually, I'm working with the inspector to make sure those get written up appropriately so that project addresses them, because generally when they come in and repaint what's there, they paint over top of it and you get what you had. These changes, I don't want to get lost, so I've actually asked if they could be raised in priority so that they get addressed through that project. The second half of the inspection is all the paperwork, and actually the longer part of the inspection. That gets done remotely, but that is happening this week. So the next few days, I've got 500, 1,000 pages of paperwork to get scanned and submitted for that part of the inspection. So after this week, we'll be past inspection season, and hopefully I can get caught up on other things. Therefore, no progress on my letter of agreement with the sheriff. And as we were talking, earlier in the meeting, I realized a few things that I should have been on this slide that weren't. One was an update on our vehicles. So I already mentioned our pickup, but the other aspect, the other vehicle is actually our fire truck. It has a very mysterious electrical problem, which prevents it from starting, which is not a good situation for a fire truck to be in, especially when, per our requirements, we have to have fire coverage here every flight, which during this time of the year is every 2 hours. We've had it into, it's a Ford, but we're not taking it to Manistee Ford. We've had it into Parkdale Auto now 3 times, and kind of, because it's electrical in nature, we're going through the diagnostic process and, you know, ruling out certain items. But every time that vehicle goes in, we're basically giving a 4-hour window, and they're actually working very well with us, knowing that it's a fire truck and knowing that it just can't be offline for extended periods of time. But every time we take it in, we then have to coordinate with the Township Fire Department. They have to be out here on site for the flights that occur during those windows. So they have been immensely helpful and have been working with us, and I owe them a very, very big thank you at the end of this. Hopefully it'll be done soon. But the next step is actually replacing the vehicle's computer. Right now, our workaround is that if the vehicle doesn't start, you basically unplug the computer and replug it back in, physically going in and pulling a cable. And then if you do that 2 or 3 times, it will reboot correctly and allow the vehicle to start. So, but what that means is generally we start it in the morning and let it run all day. So we don't turn it off because, as happened, because one of the items for the inspection is a fire drill. You've got 3 minutes to respond to a place on the field as if an incident occurred. And started beginning of the day with the inspector, explained the situation and said, you know, what we're doing, and understandable things happen, but asked what he wanted to do for that drill. And fortunately he said, well, if your standard procedure is to leave it run, then we'll do the official drill in that procedure. But then he said, I'd also like to just then turn it off and then do a non-drill run and see how much longer it takes. And, so the drill went fine, and we met the 3-minute required time of that drill. But when we did it without, we couldn't get it started. Our workaround wasn't working, partly because that disconnecting the computer, reconnecting the computer, the sign is that you hear an audible click of a certain component that's engaging, and we had a jet out on the ramp running, so we couldn't hear anything. So it was, we couldn't follow our standard procedure on that. So for someone, one of my staff, you know, under the gun, working with the inspector, trying to get it started, and realizing the clock is running, it was not. But
Have we seen the invoices for that yet? You said it's at Parkdale Auto?
no, we have not.
Okay, and then when we do, we'd see them under repairs and maintenance?
Yes.
How old is that truck?
2006.
Would that be something we could take to that? Yeah, I never remember that.
Local revenue sharing.
I mean, is it time to replace it?
It isn't. I mean, it doesn't get much use, because it really just sits.
But that panel might be deteriorating because it just sits.
Right. So, it is currently not identified as an asset that
The sheriff and the city are looking into this battery backup type of thing, so that they're not running the gas all the time. So as we go into, you know, repairing this and looking at it, whether or not you need a new motherboard or whatever, you don't, get that replaced, you may be able to look at that battery backup system that they have, so that you can keep it running, but you're not gonna be running on gas.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, I don't remember if it was the chief or sheriff that brought that up, but they wanna fit all the cars to this, because they always have to keep them running too.
Yep.
So that keeps the electronics running?
Yeah, it keeps everything going, yep,
Okay.
yep.
The cost of the board, the local revenue sharing board?
By the time the next grant cycle comes up, no, because we'll have incurred that cost. The revenue sharing grants aren't, they're future projects, not for paying for things you've already done.
Well, if you check in that battery system too, then that's something you could, in the future, if.
But there is something that we do plan based on our budget to be asking for in the next cycle, and that's, for our fire training next year. We're planning on having them on site, so that's about an extra $6,000 of expenditure that we're looking at submitting a request on for this year. So yeah, I mean, vehicles are becoming my woe right now. Hopefully we can get through this bad luck. Next item was, at the July 5th City Council meeting, I gave the annual airport update. Actually, it turns out that it was the first update since pre-COVID. And told them many of the same things we've been talking about with air carrier and the issues, but at the same time looking forward to renewing now the 2-year contract with Cape Air and some of the positive things that have gone on as well. And then last Friday, I did a presentation to the County Board of Commissioners, basically discussing the ARPA grant request that this board approved a few months ago. And Karen, do you have any update as to that process, now that you've had your meeting?
No, we'll talk this, Tuesday.
Okay, so you didn't, at the end of the presentation,
We did not set a time.
Talk through that.
It went south real fast, so.
Okay.
We had a process. And the process changed, and so that was, we had a scoring process.
Yeah.
I learned never miss a meeting, because that got changed.
Okay.
But I did really push, again, we have county assets. It's our responsibility before anything else.
And I tried to say the right words on that.
You did fine. Yep, you did fine. I like that you turned it into 3 different, you know, no matter what, I'll push, but I think it should be the whole amount. I did the whole spiel about, you know, community has a tendency to do Band-Aids all the time, and time to stop.
And Jeff was saying similar comments, so. Okay, so then moving on, again, Manistee Township, we already talked about that when we adjusted the agenda. I don't really have much of an update here, other than I'm meeting with Karina Newhoff this week, to go over our ALP update, and still awaiting those final invoices on the PFAS testing. Nothing here is new. I've talked about all this when we were looking at the passenger numbers. And this last item, though, is something that I had a conversation on Friday. So for those that are newish on the board, approximately 2 years ago, the airport took over ownership from Ted Ahrens of essentially the largest hangar we have on the airport. It's a Can 1 kind of over in the corner, River Road and 31. And he basically donated that hangar to the airport. It was on a long-term lease that eventually it would have reverted to the airport anyway, but I think he still had about 10 more years left on that lease, so he didn't need to do that. But by doing a donation, he could get a tax in doing that. And there were issues with the door and needing repairs, and he didn't want to invest in the hangar because he no longer has an airplane or is flying, so he was basically just using it as storage. So the airport acquired that asset earlier than we would have otherwise. We have been leasing it to Cape Air since they started, so now almost 2 years at $1,000 a month, so that's, over those 2 years, would be $24,000 in revenue, which we had some revenue coming in under the lease, probably about $2,000 a year, versus the $12,000 now. So we've made certainly, but we've also had to invest in door repairs and things. So owning something doesn't only bring in revenue; it also brings in expenses. Cadillac Air Service, who does maintenance for many of the aircraft that are based here, including all of the ones that Orchard Beach owns, and does maintenance for Cape Air here. Their new agreement with Cape Air is more substantial. In fact, Cape Air is essentially setting up a maintenance base here. They basically want to provide Cadillac Air Service enough work to do that they can have an employee based here full time. And all of that is being done out of that hangar that Cape Air is leasing. They've got now internet set up out there. They've got a parts base set up out there, a nice set of tools. I mean, they've brought up a lot of stuff from St. Louis to make this happen, and it's kind of ongoing. So this is all very good because as an airport, having maintenance on field is an important business to have. This is something that I've been talking off and on with Joe Sprague from Cadillac Air Service for a number of years now about, why don't you move over from Cadillac, come over to Manistee? Things have obviously transpired here that has made that worth his while, and starting to provide this service outside of the realms of what Cape Air's needs is, I think, something we want to encourage. So he came to me on Friday and we had a conversation. So that hangar that Cape Air is leasing does not have heat. It's insulated, it was built insulated, but it was never, outfitted with a heater to, heat it in the winter. He's going to be having someone based here all winter long, really wants to get heat in that hangar by winter. But, and he's willing to make that investment, but he's looking for some sort of a longer-term agreement, maybe along the lines of what we did with Mr. Shively on the other hangar that we had, where we had an agreement of you make these improvements over a period of time and, certain things can happen. So I said I was having a meeting today and I'd bring this up for the board, and really I'm looking for board's guidance as to how they want to proceed on this. If you want to delegate it to me to negotiate something, if you want one of our committees to be involved in doing this, just, I think there's an opportunity of increasing business here at the airport and adding a valuable asset. And, the financial details need to be worked through.
Well, if we can get those hangars fixed up, if that grant goes through to fix those hangars up, to be able to have hangars with doors that work, and a maintenance on the field, I mean, that's a fantastic, call.
It's an incentive to
Oh,
then
yeah.
have those hangars be utilized and recoup the investments that we're looking to put into them, yes.
Yeah, I see no downside to this at all. How long of a, agreement does he want?
To be determined.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's in our best interest to have a pretty long-term agreement if we're trying to entice people to bring their planes here and base them in Manistee. To be able to also say that we have a long-term agreement to have this, or well, you don't have to say that, but you know in the back of your mind that facility that we're using as a promotion isn't going anywhere in the next 12 months or 24 months.
Well, obviously, because Cape Air is just renewed for 2 more years, I
Mhm.
mean,
There's at least that.
certainly there's that, but
But Joe wants to go further
his
than that.
thought are longer term than that, yes.
I wouldn't go up 10, I mean, maybe
yeah.
5 years,
Yeah.
that's good with a 90-day clause, That gives you at least 2 cycles of, contracts with like Cape Air or who, somebody
Right.
else. And then a little bit extra. Start going out longer than that, you're getting caught. You don't know. What if things really change, how to be caught with having to fit a
Right,
round peg into a square hole.
right.
Give them the hangars that eliminate the backup plane. That's already a dead issue anyway, because Cape Air's not in there and Cadillac's in there working on somebody else. Where does the second Cape Air plane?
I mean, since Cape Air currently has the lease on it, obviously they're gonna be a party in this, process as well. So we have to meet their needs as well. And I think that would be part of whatever agreement is ensuring that Cape Air's needs are met.
You mentioned the Shively deal, so for the Shively deal, he was making the capital investments, but in return for a reduced rent payment, so are they looking for a reduced rent? And if that's the case, then I would need to know how much we're talking about.
I would say yes, they're
Yeah.
looking for reduced rent and maybe a sharing of sublease payments, because Cape Air would still be paying, for hangar space. So,
How long is their current lease?
right now Cape Air is on a month-to-month. But the expectation is through the length of their contract, so 2 months.
I thought we had a hangar that the plane didn't fit in.
Orchard Beach has another hangar, that Cape Air is also leasing for the smaller Cessna 402s.
All right.
And actually, complete tangent to this conversation, but as part of my update this morning from Cape Air, they are planning finally to eliminate all the Cessna 402s from the Midwest and be Tecnam.
Okay.
They won't be needing that other hangar because it won't fit.
It'd be nice to know if you have the ARPA funds, because what you have allocated for, updates, you could take that money and into the hangar. If we just,
Now, do we have other hangars that are heated already, or no?
The only heated hangars on the airfield are the ones that Orchard Beach owns. There are no airport-owned hangars that are heated.
So
The
when you-
airport basically owns the T hangar rows, and those typically are not heated. And then now this larger one that keeps
Okay.
part of this conversation.
So when we had one of our other meetings, though, they pay rent, but they also pay what, electric costs,
Utilities, yes.
utilities?
Yes. Yep.
So if they put heat in, are they gonna pay the heat bill on that, or do they want that included into their
Under the
rental
current
agreement?
terms, it would, all utilities are the lessee's responsibility, so it'd be their responsibility,
Okay.
whether that be Cadillac or Cape Air.
think it's okay to get into a conversation and then just kind of hammer out what they're looking for, get that, all those ideas as we continue to move forward, find out if we've got the ARPA funding. We'll know that within the week here. And then you can make the final decision on whether, how to do the contract and stuff based on get that or not.
I would just suggest along the same timeline that maybe you reach out to TCI or a couple other firms and just get an idea, ballpark of what's it gonna cost to put heat in,
Mm-hmm.
so you know what you're negotiating about.
Yeah, absolutely, good idea.
The thing I can think is you're gonna have those big hanging heating systems.
What would go in there? I mean, there are different versions of
Yeah.
that, but yeah, it's something. Retrofit.
Nope.
Floor. So,
Where you're headed?
well, again, is this something you want me to
I-
deal with, or do you want a
I
committee to
think-
work with me on, or?
Would you like some people to sit with you?
It's always helpful to have people to bounce ideas off of, but it could just be you as chair, but Mike
I
seems
would-
to
I
have
would-
a lot of ideas, so.
I would serve on something like that, would you?
All right, you gotta volunteer, let's go.
So, I mean, I don't think you need a formal committee.
No, we
You
can just
You've got, I've
ad
got
hoc,
two people
we
that I
Yeah,
can work with.
Sure.
okay.
That's great.
Sure.
So it's gonna, you three?
Yes.
Unless there's somebody else that wants to also have input or spend some time? All right. I didn't think people would be pounding on the door.
So that is the end of my report.
Hey, old business. Have both either been postponed or covered, I think.
Yep.
Nothing under new business? Comments by any authority member? Stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.